Hello again. The coronavirus pandemic is forcing nations and corporates to do things differently. As the world adopts measures like social distancing or physical distancing, futurists say the time is this time is an opportunity for all to reimagine how we live and work. They say the world, and especially the African continent, cannot go back to the old ways of doing things. I'm joined now via Skype by Dr. Njeri Mwagiru from the Institute of Futures Research, and she's a senior futurist there. Very good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for joining us. So when somebody says, hello everybody at Abrai, I am a senior futurist, what does that mean?
Hi, and thank you so much for inviting me to share some comments on this show. I would answer at Abrai if I was asked that question. That a senior futurist is someone that studies the future. And it can sound a bit airy-fairy, but it's actually based on some very solid science and research on trends. And we use forecasting methodologies to try to understand how events occurring today and events that we can anticipate might unfold, and therefore how to best prepare.
Some would say that the future is today. When we look at the African continent and where we have come from and where we are right now, what would be your state of assessment? Some people have been called Afro-pessimists for pointing out that, hey, things aren't going really well for us.
I think definitely you can choose any point and any perspective from which to engage the African context, because it's so complex and it's so diverse, and there are multiple stories and I believe narratives that are reflected in what we see on the ground. So in terms of a perspective of the past and where we've come from, we could definitely choose to be pessimistic and bemoan all the lack of development, bemoan the challenges we continue to face. Some may even argue the very slow pace of transformation. On the other hand, we could take an optimistic perspective and celebrate the gains achieved, the lessons learned, as well as align ourselves to ensure that we maximize on the opportunities available and try to mitigate the risks to the best capacities available. So I do feel that depending on and regardless of what your particular perspective is, it is important to be pragmatic and therefore to base a lot of your decision making and your actions around evidence and the data that's available, so that as much as possible you are reflecting what the current realities and context is.
Let's continue on the optimistic perspective theme and talk about maximizing opportunities. A country like Senegal making some headway in terms of creating testing kits in that country. There's a widely held view that perhaps the continent needs to reindustrialize and preparing for the future. Many of the things that we are importing are things that we could literally do ourselves.
Yes, that's, I think, an excellent point, and one of the key lessons that's emerging from the COVID-19 ongoing pandemic. And less a new lesson, and more so a lesson that we're already aware of that's being emphasized. And the lesson is that the intra-Africa trade levels are extremely low. And I think with the disruptions that we're seeing internationally to the value chains and with the struggling economies of the continent's traditional partners in Asia, in Europe, in North America, this is an opportunity, and we do have a platform to begin to explore with a bit more rigor the intra-Africa trade possibilities and the manufacturing and industrialization capabilities within Africa as well. I'm aware of very positive stories that are coming out of the continent. You mentioned Senegal. I'm also aware of stories to do from North Africa, from East Africa, around innovation and universities that are taking up the challenge to provide the necessary kit and equipment to deal with the pandemic. So I feel this is definitely a good opportunity for us to see what our capabilities are and put ourselves to the test.
What is the future for this very young continent in terms of the youth population?
I think that's going to be very much dependent on how we mobilize our capacities and support systems around the youth population. So we know that Africa continues to have the lowest levels of literacy and education. We need to see massive advancement in terms of upskilling and training of our youth populations and capabilities. I think we also need to see support across different sectors for the youth, whether it's through sports, community upliftment initiatives, agricultural initiatives that speak to drawing the youth back to that sector, including issues such as communications, media, the fourth industrial revolution. I think it's important that we draw in a multi-sectoral, collaborative and support base to see how we can best engage the youth capabilities that we know are nascent within the continent, but we do need to nurture.
A final word from you on the role of indigenous knowledge systems on the continent in battling this virus and moving forward in the future. I
think the COVID, again, is offering us an opportunity to reflect on the different models and systems and the short gaps that the pandemic is spotlighting. And I think in engaging possibilities and alternative futures, in looking to fresh solutions to endemic problems, issues that have been continuing for some periods now, this is a good moment for us to look at peripheral innovative systems that may have been overlooked, that may have been marginalized, and African knowledge systems and the ongoing capacities that exist within different aspects of the continent, I think are definitely an untapped resource, and it would be worthwhile to engage more with this.
Dr. Njeri Mwagiru from the Institute for Futures Research. She's a senior futurist there. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.